Hello, I'm Christine and I want to welcome you to the Creative Sewist Community YouTube channel, where we discuss sewing techniques, time-saving sewing tips, and fun, easy projects. If this sounds like your type of community, then please subscribe and ring the bell so that you are notified every time a new helpful video is uploaded. And now, let's get into today's lesson. How to easily add an elasticized waistband to an oversized dress. While oversized flowing dresses are comfortable, they don't often flatter your curves, and at times you can seem lost in too much fabric. The easiest way to add definition is to define your waistline. But how do you do this with a dress that lacks structure and curves? Simply by adding an elastic waistband. By following these easy steps, you will be able to transform your shopping mistakes into wardrobe staples. To add an elasticized casing to this dress, I first need to determine where I want my waistline to occur. I've measured from the bottom of my dress to the top of the pocket, and it's approximately 19 inches. So what I will do is I'm going to turn this dress inside out, and I'm going to mark a line 19 inches around the circumference of the dress. So as you can see, here is the front of the dress marked, and here are the markings on the back. As you can see from the ruler, the elastic that I will be using for this particular project is approximately 3/4 of an inch wide. So that means that my casing should be a minimum of 1 inch wide. I will cut a piece of jersey knit fabric, since the dress is jersey knit, approximately 1.5 inches wide. As you can see, I've now cut the casing. It's about 1.5 inches to 1.75 inches wide. To attach the casing to the dress, you will need to first pin it in place. Lay the right side of your casing to the wrong side of your dress and pin along your marked line 1/4 inch. You want to have 1/4 inch seam allowance here. Pin along that line before you take the dress to the sewing machine. So one little trick I have to make sure that I'm staying on my line is I will flip my fabric up as I'm going along. I'll use my little ruler here. I'll measure 1/4 inch, and then I'll put my fingernail right there. And where my fingernail is resting, I'll put a pin. Just be careful you don't pin your finger, but that's my little trick for making sure that I have an accurate placement. Now what I wanted to step in here and show you is that I finished pinning this fabric that will be my casing to the wrong side of the dress. It is the right side of the casing fabric to the wrong side of the dress. But what I did is I went in here and I folded over my casing fabric approximately 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch to give it a more finished seam that will be against the body. And then I finished pinning this here. I allowed myself about a 1 inch tail for now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to sew this. I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch from my edge, and that will create the first seam. I'll see you over at the sewing machine. Using my 1/4 inch seam allowance foot, I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam, and what I will do is I'm going to line the edge of this foot with the edge of the fabric that is pinned in place. Be careful not to sew over your pins. As you can see, I lifted this second part just a little bit so I can get started. So what I'll do, I'm going to sew slowly initially. I fed the dress through the neck hole. I forgot to mention that, but this is just using a straight stitch. You may have to stop, lift your foot, and adjust as needed if your fabric isn't sliding smoothly. Sometimes that happens. Okay, so we've returned to the starting point, and what you will see is you have a little bit of stretch in your garment and your fabric. So what I'm doing, I'm going to carefully sew over that seam. Now I know that my extra fabric is here, so I'm going to trim this tail about 3/8 of an inch before I finish sewing this. I'm going to trim this carefully. And now you can see the end isn't that much longer. So I'm just going to finish the stitching here, and I'll meet you over at the ironing board. As you can see, I've brought this over to the ironing board, and I now have a seam sewn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my casing up, and I'm going to press it towards the top. I'm going to use an iron set on a medium heat and finish pressing. So I finished pressing my seam. I've pressed it towards the top of the dress. I'm now going to fold under the fabric about 1/4 of an inch. I've laid my elastic on top now just to show you the width I'll need for my casing. And if you're, while you're pinning your casing, if you're ever in doubt, just lay your elastic on top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this under 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to pin it, and I'll show you the results. So I've pinned the casing 1/4 of an inch. I turned it under and I pinned it along the top. I've measured as I've gone, so my casing, it's approximately 1 inch wide, and that's good because the elastic, if you recall, is 3/4 of an inch wide, so we'll have some ease to slide this through. But what I wanted to show you here specifically is this is my opening. This is where I'm going to put the elastic in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to head over, after you've put the pins in, you want to just take your iron and lightly press this. I'll show you. You just want to give it a quick pressing, and I'll see you over at the sewing machine and I'll show you how to finish this. I'm going to begin sewing where I've overlapped my fabrics. I may have to remove the pin that's behind it. And I want to sew as close to this edge as I can. One important thing to remember is not to stretch your fabric while you're sewing it. You can hold it in place. If you need to use a little pointer or a little screwdriver to hold it in place, that's fine, but just don't pull it. I've made it the whole way around, so now I'm going to put the elastic in my casing. I've put a safety pin through my elastic. I've slid the top of this through my casing opening, and I'm going to carefully thread this through my new casing, and then I'm going to adjust it until I get the desired tightness. So I've fed my elastic through the casing. I've adjusted it to the tightness that I'd like. Now it's time to finish off this project. So what I'm going to do, and it's important to note this, before you sew this elastic, make sure that the elastic did not twist on you while you were feeding it through your casing. If it did twist, just manipulate the elastic until it is laying neatly for you and it's not twisted anywhere along in your casing. At this point, what you're going to do is you are going to run a stitch right here along your elastic. We're going to trim it and we're going to let this snap into the casing. I'm going to fix my elastic casing here. You can hand stitch this shut, or you can just leave it as is and you are finished. And that's it. Your casing is officially done. I want to thank you for taking time to visit the Creative Sewist channel, and I would love to hear from you. If you have any questions or content suggestions, please leave a comment below. Did you find this video lesson helpful? If so, please give this video a like, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so that you will receive notifications every time new sewing content is uploaded. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.